Hello, welcome to the Crackpot Podcast.
It's gonna be a beautiful day to start up a revolution. Molotov cocktails, martini shotgun shells, wild, 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 wild one. God forbid the cops get called. I say the more the merrier inside this free-for-all. By God, I gotta see it fall. I got front row tickets to the greatest show of all.
Good morning, James. Oh, sorry.
Good morning, Lynn.
It's episode 61 of the Crackpot Podcast. Summer 2019 podcast marathon is what we're doing.
Yes, we're trying to rupture the cracked pottery.
No chance of that.
Okay.
Okay, I want to do a little business here. We added a BitChute channel.
Which I like that very much. That's I really like BitChute, the way it looks. So thanks for doing that.
So we will be uploading all new episodes to BitChute, and I will, over time, add all the old stuff to BitChute as well. I have local backups of everything, but it takes time to upload. I don't think we're in any immediate danger of getting banned from YouTube, primarily because our listeners are such a elite group that that we haven't attracted that much attention. So, we're okay, but I think it's good to be on another channel. I tried Minds,
Okay.
and Minds is not, I don't think you can get videos more than 15 minutes onto Minds. So it's not a really good option for us right now, but I do have,
Idea.
yeah.
Maybe we could use that for. You wanted me to do readings?
Oh yeah, we
Stuff
can
we
post
look
those
together.
there.
Maybe we could use it for that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I want to do that. We'll have to figure out when's a good time to do those. Yeah.
And Riley, I know you put a lot of money and effort into that high castle on the side of the mountain there, and I hope you're not too disappointed in the fact that the zombie occupation government doesn't seem to be interested in shutting down your entertainment listening. Okay, so it's probably the mortar attack is probably a ways off. Okay, but I still think it was a good idea to buy the peak of the mountain behind you too, so they can't just drop bricks on you.
That's right.
All right.
The mountain redoubt. Would love to see it one day, Riley. Go visit. Well, okay, we had a bunch of topics that we wanted to cover, and I actually sent you an email, but you don't have to worry about that. But I wanted to cover a little piece of current events, and I want to do it really carefully. So a few days ago, Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, he sent a bunch of tweets out to the effect that there are these 4 women, they are women of color, 4 women congresspersons, brand newly elected congresspersons. If they don't like America so much, they can just go back where they came from And anyway, you can find those tweets.
I don't suppose you have pictures for me, but I have admired the one lady dancing on the rooftop before. I don't care if they're women of color. Are they women of curves? Okay. I mean, that's,
Let me see.
this is
Yeah,
where I'm
yeah.
going to decide whether or not they stay or go.
The one who's really the worst is actually probably the prettiest. She's the one that wears the headscarf. Ilhan
Okay.
Omar. I don't know because I'm a girl, so I know that women perceive attractiveness differently. However, of the four, I think she's the prettiest. AOC is the second prettiest.
Okay.
But the other two are not that pretty.
Okay. So they each have a handmaiden,
Yeah.
and we can keep them as a group. The other two can act as their handmaidens, and AOC can call me Cortez or Hernan, whichever she likes. And the other young lady, I'll be fine with Tamerlane. Okay. All right. She doesn't have to take the scarf off until everybody else leaves the room. All right.
So
I'm fine with that. I'm a traditional guy.
I know you're fine.
Okay.
I understand.
Bare knees and sandals. I really like nice. Could you pick out the nice little slipper like I don't know what they're called, but they look like slippers, but they're like sandals, and girls with little feet look really cute in them.
Oh, I don't know. I don't have little feet, so.
All right. Well, the other two girls are going to be in charge of that. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
So we're good. We're good. Okay. We've discussed their political qualifications.
All right.
I'm good to go. I don't know what Trump has a problem with.
Well, okay. So what followed those tweets was this huge, really third world style event in the House of Representatives that we don't need to get into that. But then Trump had a campaign rally. And the crowd started chanting, "Send her back." They used to chant, "Lock her up," which notably never happened, right? And now they're chanting, "Send her back." And this is really causing uproar in the media. So to be clear, Ilhan Omar was born in Somalia, and she is a naturalized citizen. There are some questions around whether she was completely honest in getting her citizenship, but her family came as refugees. So they chanted, "Send her back," and everybody's flipping out. And Trump said, "Oh, no, I didn't really like it when they chanted, 'Send her back.' I don't think they should chant like that." But he said the same thing when people chanted, "Lock her up." He would act like, oh, we don't really want to lock her up, So anyway, the point is that I think that this is an important threshold for normal, ordinary GOP Republican Americans. I see it as an important turning point or moment here.
Well, if you look at what happened with the whole alt-right fiasco, where people on the political right were beat up for a year during Trump's campaigns, and there was no attempt to defend them, and he did nothing to try to get defense for these people either. He was content with his supporters being beat up on the street because he's a smart politician. Eventually, this results in these people getting determined to fight back. Some of them ask me for advice on how to fight back. And I can give them the biomechanical advice and then say, look, if you do it, you're toast, because this is what the government is waiting for. You're just being baited by these leftist agitators. And when you finally successfully fight back, you're going to be rounded up. And it happened. All right. Now, that was on the physical street fighting end of it. Now I think you're going into the cartoon political rally end of it, where you're now the people on the left and the Democratic Party have been acting so obnoxiously that they're now encouraging imitation in kind from conservative Republicans to act obnoxiously. And this will give, again, this footage like this is going to be like the Nuremberg March for the future. That, you're not going to see any footage of any hysterics from the left. You're only going to see footage of people acting intolerant on the right, and it's going to It's going to feed the news loops of the future to marshal more hatred and polarization. So I think it's all going according to plan. And I think that there's no way this stuff hurts this guy. I'm confident that the king of New York, who somehow, for some reason, took a demotion to president of the United States, this guy is like the ultimate surfer in any power game. I would have loved to play Empires in Arms with this asshole. Okay. It would be so much fun. I mean, having a guy trying to basically rip your plans to shreds in front of your eyes and grin at you. Okay.
Yeah.
At the same time, that's, he'll roll boxcars while you roll snake eyes and then pat you on the back.
I'll tell you, I
this
see
guy's
it.
great.
What I am foreseeing in this is that some threshold has been breached because Republicans normally love people of color. They go out of their way to say that legal immigrants are wonderful and we just want illegal immigrants to be dealt with in a more, effective manner. And I've never been racist, I have all these friends and blah, blah, blah. And they'll bend over backwards to seem like we accept all these premises of the left, but we just want, something a little bit more like it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. But when you have this huge crowd chanting that this black woman needs to be sent back to Africa, who she is a citizen, she came here illegally, and I just think that a threshold has been crossed in the minds of people where, and there's another video. Now, granted, these women are from Texas, but there's these lovely Texan women, GOP voters, who actually came out and said that Trump's tweets were absolutely correct and that Trump isn't racist, but that these women are anti-white. And these women said this on national television. So I
think this is important if you're going to recreate the United States of America as the United States of Kyrgyzstan. Okay, then I think this is important because just as the indigenous European American population starts slipping out of demographic dominance, if you could get around half of those people to start behaving intolerantly towards, the pets of the liberal half of that population, then it's going to give you the tension you need. You've got to have some kind of tension if you're going to have really a dynamic relationship. And the state, at this point, the nation's not going to expand anymore. At this point, the state needs strong factions within it fighting against each other and hating each other in order to keep some kind of dynamic going, because the forever war just doesn't seem to be providing it. It's not, people just don't care about these guys fighting overseas. So one thing about Orwell's prediction in 1984 that is kind of already worn thin and is no longer effective is people really caring and feeling menaced about the great Asian conflict, which has really turned into the great global conflict against terrorism. People just don't. Crime's gotten high enough in the U.S. that people just really don't care about our guys getting killed overseas, trying to get other people to be liberal Democrats in other countries. So the focus is going to have to be on strife in America. So I think it's going to accelerate the uncivil war in the U.S., which most importantly to me means that my current book project will be more relevant. I'll maybe sell 3 copies of each instead of 2 copies of each. So, if this gets me an extra $7.50 a month, then, it's worth half the country going up in flames. I'm good with it.
Country's going up in flames anyway. I just think that the
I
other half.
I might as well cash in and get a cold cut sub, right? Once a month. I can go out there and get a cold cut sub on America. I'm good with that.
On the flames, toasted on the flames of this burning country.
So, thank you for this uplifting news. I feel much better once again for being an inmate of the United States of America.
I mostly just want to go on record here. We're taping on July 19th that this is a turning point. It's more important than people think. Trump gave a little disavowal, like, no, I disagree. It means something that normal Republicans some of these ideas that people around here may have had for many years have really irreversibly seeped into the normal Republican consciousness.
Now, one thing that, since I listen to some left-wing podcasts, I like to remind the listeners of, currently right now, the narrative on the left, the historical narrative, is being regurgitated to reflect the fact that 100,000 people were not killed in the Spanish Civil War. They were killed by Franco. They were killed by the right. So these people that are all slaughtered as part of this attempt at
Bolshevik,
an international communist takeover
right,
of Spain, that's now being retaught as a right-wing takeover of a socialist republic. The next thing in line is going to be framing Central American struggles in the same way, and ultimately the Soviet Union is going to be taught as not a communist killing of 100 million people. It's going to be a Russian killing, okay, of 100 million non-Russian people. And what are the Russians? They're Europeans. Okay, so all the narrative on the left is all being retooled to reflect people of European descent being mass murderers, not people of the ideological left being mass murderers. So they'll leave out Pol Pot. You won't hear about him. And the Chinese, the Great Chinese Genocide, is not going to be a communist genocide. It's going to be a Chinese genocide, because now the Chinese are depicted by both the left and the right in the United States as being aggressively nationalistic and capitalistic. Okay, so the left and the right in the U.S. agree on this. China is nationalistic and capitalistic. So again, this is another example where the right has agreed to the left's narrative, and it's going to be used against them. Okay, so over the next 10 years, every historical atrocity from the past 100 years is going to be painted as a right-wing atrocity. So this all falls on the line pretty neatly. I really try not to overuse serendipity in my fiction, but looking at the way history is playing out, I'm thinking maybe I'm underusing serendipity, because it's happening a lot.
Yeah, the way things fit together, it's out of fashion to give Trump any credit for anything that's happened. And, I don't know if people, it's like a question of a big man version of history or whatever. But the fact is that he was elected, and under his watch, these things are happening faster, really, than anybody expected. Or, maybe you expected it, but it's here.
You know who predicted it? Uncle Ted.
That's right.
Who I believe was framed by the fascist Bureau of Incrimination, okay? And he went along with it just so he could get his writing out rather than just go off in silence as some serial killer.
And he just released a new edition of his book also.
What he points out is that, well, once a powerful system gets rolling, threats to the system will accelerate the aggression of the system, the instinctive aggression of the system. And people's individual decisions are parts of the systemic instinct. An individual, for instance, that works for a government agency, their feeling of disenchantment with the head of state, for instance, can be an expression of an instinctual systemic response. Okay,
I want you to talk about that, because I know that you have a friend who is a recently retired federal employee and gave you some impressions of the last couple years that he had, which we talked a little bit about earlier, which is why I'm kind of laughing. But, please tell us.
Well, this fellow, his name's Jasper. He, I can't tell you what agency he worked for, but he was in intelligence. And it's one of the smartest guys that I've ever met. And I've actually played competitive tabletop war games with this guy. And I kind of felt like an Iraqi guy in a white SUV in 1991 in Kuwait. When I played the student war game. Right? You have tens of thousands of highly intelligent, motivated, and patriotic Americans that were raised as they were gathered together as part of the Great Crusade against communism. And then they were seamlessly rolled into the Great Crusade against terrorism. So they still see the Russians, having been the driving force of the Soviet Union, they still see the Russians as the enemy. And of course they see every third world country as a potential enemy. And
also like a project, right? Like it's like,
well, yeah. I mean,
my kids want to do an art project, and so mom is mobilized. And I think that many federal employees see these third world countries as like, oh, we just got to get in there and, do something for these people.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And, he told me that his people did not think that the current president was a good president for the United States because the president came right out and said that the American intelligence community is not trustworthy. So they have their own reasons for thinking that he's not trustworthy. Majority of them seem to be of the opinion that he became president so he could advance future business deals for himself with foreign nations. This is their way of explaining why he insists on having private conversations with heads of state without an American interpreter. Now, I would interpret that as Trump not trusting the intelligence agency and Trump suspecting that every one of these interpreters is working for at least one intelligence agency and is going to leak what he says and be able to derail negotiations with other heads of state. Since the guy is a businessman, I would assume he's going to go to great lengths to try to avoid war. And all of these people have been raised, their bread and butter has been, how do we get into the next war? How do we win the next war? And of course you want to get into the next war because you always win the next war because you're the United States. But people from the outside are now looking at the longest war in U.S. history that's still not been won. 18 years in Afghanistan? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So
it's not a war. It's stupid to call that a war. It's some kind of project. It's not.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think you really have a distrust of, and these are people that want the best for the United States. I mean,
there was an aspect of it of these that the Democrats, either these 4 women of color of the apocalypse or the 24 presidential candidates who also, because this man is a Democrat, is what you told me, who also now are alienating him because he's a white guy, he's a middle-class white guy, and his
stated fear was that some nut, somebody that's unelectable,
an un-American. You said un-American, right?
Yes, is going to be, and they're going to be unelectable because people like him who work in the government are just not going to be able to get on board with a very un-American view of the world. And he's really afraid of that. He's pretty much convinced at this point that Democrats are going to blow the election and they're going to have to deal with Trump for another 4 years. And the one thing that was really funny, I came right out. I said, you know what? I said, I bet you, I said, I saw the 4th of July parade, military parade in Washington a week or two after Trump had that meeting with Putin, and Trump was using all this power language, patting him on the shoulder and everything, like he was his boy. I said, I bet you that Putin said to him, real heads of state have military parades. I bet he said that. And he told me, yes, that's what we all thought. We're like, we know Putin dared him and he did it. Okay. It's like I said, there's the only flaw I see with these guys is they believe, since they've been in the business of, and they all signed up believing in, the U.S. Navy, a force for good in the world, the U.S. government, a force for good in America, and trying to just spread all this goodness around. I mean, they really believe that, forcing people to do things at the point of a gun if you've got the right solution, is the way to go.
You better
And they don't even see
mark
it as
that
aggression.
ballot.
Right. They don't even see it as aggression.
Yeah.
So, and these are really people that are so American, they would sneer at any idea of a deep state, yet they are the deep state.
Absolutely. That's what it is, that he's a good soldier. He is competent. This is important, right? We're talking about smart people who do
Oh,
their
yeah.
jobs and are good at their jobs and want to just keep doing their jobs. And Trump comes in and says, "No, I want you to stop that." And of course, everybody has in their identity is their work. Even if you hate your job, just by virtue of the fact of doing it all day, you identify with it. And so I completely understand that. But what I want from him is the understanding that he is not welcome in his party. All right. I'm not saying he has to be a Republican or vote Trump or love Trump, but he just simply needs to understand that these women hate him. And, well, I mean, there's now like a New York Times article about how the space program was all about white men. And these people are so dumb that they take for granted the fact that you can go to space, which we basically can't do anymore. We can send satellites or whatever, uh, and then work backwards and say, well, why weren't women involved? They're just so dumb. Okay, so that's what I want. Smart, competent white men to tell them. I'm telling you, the Democrats hate you. Okay.
Well, I think that's actually probably an effective strategy for taking power permanently away from European Americans in America. There used to be a pretty large group of people on the right that would effectively throw their vote away by voting libertarian or by not voting or by voting for Lyndon LaRouche. What I think is happening behind the scenes, and this might not be planned, this just might be organic, might be instinctual, is that the machine is going to act in such a way as to alienate European Americans on the center left the same way it alienated European Americans on the right, and just get them to step away from the political table, to make them people like me. I mean,
Right.
he asked me, he's a full-time dad now, okay? And that's what he used to vote his wife to. And he was asking me for, since I've done so much work on urban blight, and he's, his sons are going to be looking right at urban blight in the nose. They're going to have to deal with this. He wanted to know what kind of solutions I could suggest. And I said, I see life as the ocean. I'm on the beach. I get a choice of building sandcastles or surfing. I'm going to surf because the sandcastle has no future. He said, well, I want a sandcastle. I said, I know. So, I can't help you. All I can do is give you my observations on how the tides act. And maybe you can build your sandcastle in the gap before the next wave comes in and demolishes it. I mean, or find a high point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. I don't believe in solutions. People that look for solutions are the people that kill hundreds of millions of their own citizens when they seriously try to double down and get a solution at the point of a gun.
No, I wouldn't. I'm not trying to tell people to vote or whatever. I mean, and I have no solution, but I have to laugh at white men who are Democrats. I just have to laugh at them.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, they've been raised to believe that it's just a label. That being labeled white is just a label of privilege, and that they have to step away from it and try to act as equals to everybody else. But what I realized living in Baltimore, that being labeled white was a pejorative. This was a target. This was a bullseye. Okay. Half the time when I got attacked in the 1980s and 1990s, white boy was the battle cry of my enemies. White boy. Okay. This was a justification for the attack. I was lucky enough to have that experience. Most suburban people, since they didn't fail economically, most of the people my age kind of individually were able to achieve economically at the rate of their parents. The reason why they didn't end up owning property as effectively as their parents was because they're no longer married and their incomes are split, and the guys are showing out income for two different families, and they're all atomized and spread out. I failed just to earn, the way that my father earned. So I ended up having to move farther into the city because of my bad economic decisions and my inability to make a good living. So I actually was, after being raised with middle class suburban sensibilities, I learned the working class truth of what it is to be labeled, the absence of distinction. Okay.
I would say that you were unwilling to earn a living. You denied your employers, for the most part, you denied them your talents and kept them for yourself. So that's nice. And for us, actually, we're the lucky ones. Well, I think that's enough on that for our current events. And I wanted to go on to, the other current event, okay, that we have to talk about that you and I we actually wrote about this together, is the grocery store thing. And people want to know. All right, and I had mentioned this briefly, and this trend is just so disgusting where these young people, and often they are young people of color. I don't know if I've seen any young people of not color doing it. But they go into grocery stores, they are doing stuff like licking the ice cream and putting it back. They are spitting in jugs of juice and putting it back. And now there's pictures of ice cream cases being locked or individual ice cream having security tag wrapped around the quart of ice cream.
Interestingly, Plantation America has a corollary. The majority of slave resistance on the part of European American slaves was to run away. The minority was to fight.
Interesting.
The majority of African American slave resistance was not to run away. It was to poison the food of their masters and set fire to their masters' property and houses. That was the majority of their form of resistance. Okay. Now, we're still, both groups of people, European American and African American, are still slaves to the same system. And subconsciously, we know it, even if we don't admit it. And what do European Americans do? They run away from the system. They build their castle in the mountains like Riley, or they go to the suburbs. They run away. And what do African Americans do to fight back against the system? They burn their cities. Okay. And now they're poisoning the food of what they see as the master class. Now, as far as how you can combat this as a retailer, I can only speak in terms of Maryland and Baltimore City because that's where I was in charge. The rules are the same in most outlying areas as they are in Baltimore City and Maryland, but I don't know if their state laws are just identical or similar municipal laws. If somebody comes into your store and, for instance, they try to steal deodorant in their backpack and you try to stop them, and some of the deodorant is destroyed in the aisle that gets raked off the shelves and it gets damaged, and the police come and this person is apprehended. You add up the product that they had in their possession that they tried to take. All of it is assumed to be damaged. Okay, so this favors the retailer. Then you add up all the product that is actually damaged that's not in their possession or wasn't in their possession. And if it comes to $300 or more, the police can arrest. It's very difficult for one hood rat to damage or try to haul away $300 worth of stuff. So you can't arrest any of these people. These people cannot be arrested once they've even come in and they've beaten up your security guy or your greeter or whatever it is, and they try to get away with stuff. You can't arrest them. Duz and I had to deal with a group of a dozen younger teenagers. These are 12 to 15-year-old boys and girls who actually would attack employees away from the store property. They swarmed him at a traffic light and were climbing on his car and spitting on his windshield and everything. We had to lock the store to keep them out. It's the only thing you could do to lock the store to keep them out, and then let your customers out one at a time. You'd have to forego business because you couldn't let customers in under these conditions. It's the only thing you can do because you're not allowed to touch them. They're sacred. According to law, they are incapable of violent crime. Even if they kill somebody under 15 years of age,
Right.
they're incapable of doing it. So there is no defense against this. This is endgame for retail food. Anywhere where this is happening, you are not going to be able to maintain a high trust retail environment. And all American retail is really based on this. And you're also talking about maintaining it with employees that have a low motivation. By the way, these are the dogs of my host. These are the dogs that guard the dressing room at Manny Soprano's strip club. Okay? So I guess some of the girls are coming in. There's no way out of this in retail food, especially when you now have, when these people, when the retailer calls the cops on these people in certain municipalities, and these municipalities will proliferate, they will be able to sue the retailer for calling the police on them because they're an oppressed individual.
Yeah, okay, I didn't
They're
bookmark
a privileged racial group.
Yeah, I didn't bookmark it, but in part of California now the law is $900. Okay. And there's a video of this big dude of color, I don't even know what color, and he's going in there and filling a bag, and someone's like, no, don't do that. And he's like, what are you going to do? Beat my ass? I'm going to sue you if you do that.
Right.
So
this is,
it's much worse.
This has been in places where the purge is still ongoing. Remember the Baltimore riots, which became the uprising and then became the unrest and then became the sacred rising?
How could I forget? It's what brought us together.
So it started as a purge of Mondalman. The target was Mondalman Supermarket. As soon as their lease is up, they're going out of business. Okay? This place employs about 150 people. It's going out of business. Most of these people aren't going to be able to get jobs. If anybody takes over that location, they're going to have to do it in a far different way, employing a fraction of the number of employees.
All right.
Because, and it's just, the open supermarket thing is indefensible. I couldn't defend, a three-man team could not defend a small supermarket. Our supermarket was the size of the produce section of the first of a Wegmans. This is it. You're going to be you have supermarkets going out of business left and right. And I just talked to Uber Joe today when he drove me up to New Jersey. He interviewed for a job at a retailer that's owned by, it's changed hands a bunch of times. It's a big retailer. They have their own wholesaling outfit. They're buying up a lot of these stores that are going out of business. He was the only Caucasian out of 45 people that were at orientation. The man that was acting as security at the orientation was the manager of that supermarket, who was a retired Maryland State Police captain.
Wow.
Who was big and muscular and intimidating and armed. And the people getting their orientation are yelling at the woman giving the orientation, telling her, no, we're not going to go outside and round up carts. No, we're not going to work when it's hot. No, you can't tell us what to do. I'll put a bullet in you. And the store manager at the location, Baltimore City location where it's taking place, is yelling and cussing at these guys and threatening them and kicking them out. And this one Caucasian guy, who's one of the only people in the room that's ever had a job before, he's afraid when they granted a break, he wouldn't go outside because these guys are showing up were like gangbangers and stuff, so they've never worked before. And so it's just insane. This is what you're going to have to staff your supermarket with. So to keep a supermarket open in the future, like the supermarket I work for, we'd let you in. You'd have to be a member. You would be let in through a locked door.
Yeah.
I would cut my staff from 110 people to 12 people. That's what I would do. And I'd only increase their rate of pay by about 10% because my overhead's going to go up enormously. My volume's going to go down. I'm going to lose all of my small dollar orders. Out of 20,000 orders a week, 80% of them were $20 orders or less. Wow. You're going to lose all that. I'm going to lose half of my customers. Boom, gone. Okay, they might as well go to a convenience store behind a Lazy Susan because they can get in and out quicker than me letting them in through a locked door. Yeah, so this is end game for retail food, and it's a good thing because I think it's one of the things that's made Americans fat and lazy and complacent.
It's true. I mean, I wrote there about what it feels like to shop in a supermarket, and the supermarket is now found in most other parts of the world, but my parents, when they came here, were accustomed to, like, you go to the fruit stand and you go to the butcher shop, and then you shop every 2 days or maybe at most every 3 days, and something,
it's a
it's
phase.
much different. Yeah.
In these other parts of the world, they're allowed to beat the shit out of you.
Right.
Probably. I saw the one Finnish girl, okay? There was a YouTube video a couple years back, and this Finnish girl beats up two Somalis. Somali shoplifters. She's holding one and she's beating the other one. Okay.
Yeah, good girl.
Okay, now that's against the law.
Okay, can I show you a funny video? This is really the most shocking and disgusting one, and I'll include the video. I've downloaded it. Can you see it?
There's some
glare.
Some upstanding brothers saying stop, 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 and I see, okay, this young lady is masturbating on a produce counter.
I think so.
Yeah, she's masturbating.
Yeah, it's gross.
Okay, with her legs spread on a produce counter. Okay, so, if it wasn't third world toilet paper, okay, those lettuce leaves, it is now.
Yeah. And that, it just shows you that how unsecured and indefensible it is, as you say. You put all these products out there and just hope that people behave, and then
it's the same thing. It's the same thing why governments allow and encourage demonstrations is because it's an evolution of the parade, and a parade is a method of supplication to the people surrounding you because you're putting yourself in an ambush situation. Okay, so you can imagine setting up a supermarket layout for a bunch of Mongol plunderers, I mean, they're just going to swing in and take it. You used to have to defend your sustenance, acquire it and defend it, and maybe one day you will again. So maybe pale faces will begin to grow hair chest again at some point in the future because they actually have to fight for their food. So we can only hope that it comes to that.
I hope so. Something. I do enjoy shopping at Costco.
Well, the club format will work, but it's going to have to work in areas where these people don't have access, or it's going to have to work there's a place called Green's Cash and Carry that wanted me for part of their management team, and I interviewed. You have to be let into this place because they wholesale cigarettes. This is where all the people that own the corner stores go. There's one in every municipal area, a cash and carry, which is essentially a club where you're not allowed access. You're not allowed to walk through the front door. It's like a strip club. As I told you in a podcast before, all economics and all politics generalize to and can be explained by strip club economics. All right, and this is another case. We have to have a bouncer at the door, frisking them, and letting people in, and making sure that they're supposed to be there. All right?
All right. Well, I just want groceries for my family. I mean, these are just basic things that we're losing slowly and surely. And so try to be ready for what's coming next and try to imagine, this is where your imagination comes in because you are so good at predicting how these things will play out.
Oh, when I rode through Whitefish, Montana on the train and stayed there for a while, there was a train ride over. This is where the cowardly white rabbits are running. They're fleeing to places like this on the roof of the frozen world. They're building a town. They got school buses going around and everything. Well, they've just built all the facilities and infrastructure to maintain this parasitic, violent pet relationship with their lower class avatars, and they are maintaining their liberal sensibilities that are going to permit it. So you're going to have a little hood rat matrix in every little nook and cranny of the United States.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay? It's coming to you.
Industrial
Right?
shoplifting is definitely increasing in the headlines in my local area. They are hitting sporting goods stores and these high-end beauty supply stores like Ulta, where, you know, a little makeup thing could be like $30 or $40 or more, and it's tiny stuff, you know, and they just run out with it. And I think someone hit an Ulta for a team hit an Ulta for 30 grand.
In Philadelphia, Colin Flaherty on BitChute recently posted a video on this mob heading into a Walgreens and looting it.
Yeah, that was
I was
huge.
like, what? There's like 10 dudes going in there, and they keep coming, and they keep coming. I mean, you would need a couple of Frankish warriors with like shields and axes at the door to even stem the tide of this. Oh, yeah. And a couple of them might still get through.
Right.
This is
just numbers.
End game. You know, in little places here and there, industrious people will be able to secure small retail outlets, and they'll do co-ops. It'll have to be a membership thing. Now, even residential property, there's a lady who I met years ago in the supermarket business who told me she was being marked by the new people moving into the neighborhood. And she had spent money on security doors for her basement door, for her basement windows, for her ground floor windows, and for her front door. And she was out of money. And she has a porch, a back porch that you can't get up to on stairs, but I could climb it. Okay. Yeah. It's not, any man could get up there that's not a North American land whale could get up. And the type of people that are doing home invasions are like these little, 6 foot tall, 135 pound guys. She doesn't have the money to secure the back. So all this money she spent, and anybody can kick in her back door or go through her window. And she was besides herself. I said, we could do it for $50. I could do it for $50. This is what you got to buy. Buy 50 feet of chicken wire and buy 50 feet of baling wire. Okay. I said, I can't put up barbed wire or razor wire because if they get hurt, they'll be sued. I said, you could fix it by smearing some epoxy on the edge of the concrete patio and putting glass or thumbtacks in it. But if some criminal with a record that's 10 pages long got his fingers cut, you could lose your house getting sued. When are people going to get the idea that this nation is set up on the premise that you're not allowed to protect yourself or your property or your loved ones? So what I did is I made her a chicken coop for her own hen self. Okay. And I wired her in. It would take me 15 minutes with pliers hanging by my toes and fingernails to get in this. Yes. Cops could get through it. I could get through it. But you know what? The current zombie apocalypse, they're going to kick in every other back door in the neighborhood before they kick in her back door. Right. And that's all you need to do. I learned that in the supermarket business. I don't need to make the store impregnable. I just need to convince them that it's going to be easier to mug people on the parking lot down the street. All right. So that's what I did. The day I resigned, I walked down to that other supermarket and I said to these 6 shoplifters and muggers that were standing like a phalanx outside of the opposition's front door, I said, hey, I just quit. You guys can head up the road and start mugging people in the parking lot again. All right. Game's up. I'm retired.
Oh, man.
Right? You just have to make sure that the old lady next door gets her door kicked in and not your door.
Sadly, yeah, that's how you just need to be the slightly less attractive.
You need to be the porcupine instead of the rabbit.
Right.
You know? That's the best you can do.
So we covered grocery store. Oh, dear. Yeah, it's sad. I always laugh because it's like you and I have the most thing we have in common is grocery stores. So we
Well,
talk about
you
it a
know,
lot.
hey, and one day the ghetto grocer will be like an archaeological document. Okay,
Yeah,
really, really, it'll
I
be
know.
like Pythias's story about finding Ultima Thule. It's something that nobody will have current experience of, and there you go. Maybe maybe the ghetto grocer is my legacy, my literary legacy,
It,
because documenting something that's not going to be around 50 years from now.
yeah, it's definitely a great book, and I am going to reissue it sometime soon. Hopefully before the end of the year, there'll be a fresh edition. We'll take down the old one. All right, well, let's move on to higher topics of intellect and
What? What? There's something more rarefied than retail food. Are you kidding me?
there's more than
Hey, how you doing? Oh, no, I'm Skyping. I'm Skyping. Right? I told you. I told you. I'm like right next to the dressing room.
yeah.
Okay.
Say hello for me too.
Yeah,
Uh,
hello.
Luckily, none of it's in my field of view, so I can work with a clear mind here. Well, you were telling me that you have been reading Chinese poetry. Is that right?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Tell
Hey,
us about that.
congratulations. Okay. All right. Could you hear?
I heard you say congratulations.
Okay. All right. Setting up for a big party tomorrow. Okay. So yes, there's a book I found at a book fair. It wasn't a book fair. Eh, There's a few booksellers and an antique fair in Fells Point, Maryland, that's held on Mother's Day every year that my mother likes to go to. And I found some books from 1911 and 1939. The book from 1911 was a book on Chinese poetry. Chinese warfare was under Aryan influence at the time. Chariot warfare, boxing, horsemanship, horse breeding, the idea of the war band. This has one source, and this is Aryan language speakers of the Caucasian, racial groups. The area of influence goes all the way to Manchuria. Manchuria was actually Caucasian, partially Caucasian a couple thousand years ago. The Scythians, went all the way from Hungary to Manchuria, to the whole steppes corridor, and eventually the European nomads become the lords of these different civilizations on the steppes littoral that they conquer, that they interact with, which they need. They need their technology. For instance, you can't make the composite bow on the steppes. The composite bow has to be made a year-long process under settled circumstances. They eventually get sucked into these different civilizations. Some various groups of Asian people develop this form of chariot warfare. They become the lords of China, Korea, and then as the horses get big enough, the chariots aren't needed anymore. The balance shifts. The power balance shifts from west to east until you get to the point where you have Asians as far west as Hungary, where it's almost over about 2,500 years. This dynamic completely changes, and the ultimate expression would be the Ottoman Turkish Empire. We've got this constant menace of a formerly nomadic people that have taken over all these rotting civilizations, and they enforce their imperial rule in a nomadic way where, for instance, Suleiman the Magnificent is constantly doing these military migrations around his empire to go attack Christian and Arabic and Berber peoples and Iranians and do his pillaging and everything. So, and looking at the origins of the Aryan war traditions. I think Aryan's the way to go because it's a name that really means, it's been translated as nobleman. The modern academics say that it's nothing, that it's totally made up, this Nazi fantasy, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, the National Socialist interpretation of what an Aryan was is cartoonish and overblown and most likely very inaccurate. But the modern academic socialist reinterpretation of the Aryans is just some kind of like later day racial construct is just as bad. What I really think that the term Aryan meant was war bands. Nobleman only means one thing. It means conqueror. That's it. You're in on the spoils when the place gets conquered and you get part of the loot. That's what nobleman means. And, we think it means person with established heredity and stuff like that. That's when it's dying. I mean, when the idea of what a noble is, it's the guys in the war band that are conquering. And so, you could say that the Aryans were the conquerors. And what Aryan means in Indian terms and in Iranian terms means exactly that. The conquerors, the people that came and occupied. So to look at what early Indo-European migratory warfare looked like, I'm looking at early Chinese sources that date from about 300 AD, and their method of warfare is Homeric. It's what the Europeans were doing about 1000 AD when you had the chariot lords ruling everything. And the other thing I'm looking at is the Plains Indians, who inherited the Aryan equestrian tradition, where they actually ended up getting this equine package, this way to make migration, instead of some desperate trekking of people on foot trying not to starve, it turns migration into an exercise in dominance. And you see this in the history of people like the Blackfeet, the Sioux, the Comanche, who were the dominant horse warriors of the plains, and the Crow, which that's a corrupt interpretation. That it would be Sioux and sacred ravens. They would have been called the sacred ravens, and they're cousins. They're actually cousins of Sioux. And you find a lot of similarities in war practices, migratory practices, and the treatment of women within the tribe, and the treatment of enemies of the same life way. You find a lot of parallels with 1750 to 1870 Native American Plains Indians to ancient Indo-Europeans and to classically ancient northern China. So I'm using that to tie some of the unknown threads together because our true ancestors were pre-literate. They used the oral traditions. That's why the ancients who were literate, they wrote down these many layered and extant poems. The literary tag that has gone up, but I have not done a post on it yet, is called Destiny's Exile. And what it is it's brief interpretations of passages from Virgil's Aeneid. And the Aeneid is a migratory epic. It's in most ways probably fanciful, but it would accurately represent the Exodus-like experience of most of the people that came to rule around the Mediterranean, which meant the Middle Sea, and their arrival on those shores. Historians will argue as to whether or not refugee Trojans really founded Rome. Probably not. They probably influenced it. Some Trojan refugees probably showed up in that den of pirates and bandits and added some influence to it. But the point is that the Roman Republic had been destroyed through the wars between the dictators, and now there needed to be justification for an empire. So Virgil goes back and as far into the tribal memory as he could mine, and at the very same time he's writing this, the Roman Empire is being menaced and threatened by peoples who have these very same migratory lifestyles that he's depicting in the Aeneid. So he might have just did like what experimental archaeologists do and use parallels. So I'm also using that to try to weave it together and give it some coherence. Hopefully there will be some success.
So one of the ways of war of the Aryan is the chariot. Is that correct?
Yes, it starts out as just a war cart. It's just a way of hauling you. A guy named Cantrell, I think, he wrote, it's a book on the chariot. And I've done a book review of it. It's deep, in the ancient history blog posts. There was different ways the chariot was used. It was used for racing. It was used for commanders' transport, just as a command car. It had ceremonial purposes. It would be used as a supply wagon. It would be used to most effectively in two methods: as a platform for firepower, for deploying the composite bow. So you'd have a driver and then you'd have a bowman. It was also used to transport infantry. The Hittites used it to transport a team of spearmen. And again, there would be a driver and a few spearmen. It seems like this was the way that the ancient Achaeans and the ancient Chinese used it, but they did it in a more heroic context where you could take somebody that was armored up almost like a medieval knight and get them to the place where they fought without them being exhausted by marching. Before horses were big enough to individually carry a fighting man, let alone a fighting man in his armor. So somebody like Achilles would show up fresh in nice, shiny, heavy armor and actually be able to run around and fight, while the poor soldiers on the line had to march and slog all the way there in their like quilted hide armor or whatever they were wearing, and they'd be exhausted. This is part of what makes him the apex predator on the battlefield, and also gives him the ability to have honorable fights at a distance from the main battle lines, as described in Homer. So a battle taxi, a firepower platform. The Scythe chariot, where it's depicted in Ben-Hur racing, where there's like these razor blades on the end of the chariot's hub to like cut legs off and everything. This was tried a couple of times in classical antiquity by the Persians and late antiquity by a Pontic king to try to defeat highly motivated infantry. It was a complete disaster. It was a fantasy idea by late antiquity people about how maybe this was used as a shock weapon. But it doesn't make any sense because you have unarmored horses in the front, and all you have to do is kill the horse and the whole war machine stops. So the chariot is actually deployed by spinning it around and then firing while you're moving parallel to the enemy troops, or spinning it around and then firing while the charioteer is taking you away from the moving troops, or by just dropping you off and picking you up. And early cavalry were probably used in similar fashion, where you had a bunch of little horses that were used. One's used to get you to the field of battle. One uses to take you from your lines to the enemy lines, and then your slave boy will come with yet another fresh horse to pick you up and carry you away, because they're small horses. They're effectively ponies, and you want to get your biggest men up there fighting. Other than the use of the dog in war, the domesticated wolf, the use of the horse and the use of the elephant. The elephant is an animal of the tropics and the subtropics, but it's only domesticated for warfare by Aryan people, as far as we know. So the big thing that the Aryans have, it's really two things. One, they put up with a lot of shit from their women, okay? And which eventually, once they become civilized, proves to be their downfall. It's not such a downfall when, you spend most of your time away from home killing other men, and then you like grab a couple of slave girls and bring them home. And when your wife starts bitching at you, you just say, look, tell it to her, and you just drop her off a new employee for the household. Okay, so it's sustainable. You can put up with a bitchy woman under those circumstances, but once it becomes civilized, it just doesn't work, and you end up with places like Sweden and America inviting their own conquerors in. But the early expression of putting up with a lot of shit from your women is important in a nomadic context, because you need women that can run things when most of your manpower is away from camp, and all you got at home is old men and a couple of young bucks.
Maybe that's part of the problem, is that women can run things to some extent, and we don't have much to run anymore in this context either, right? And I think this is a complaint you get from women on the right, where, what is my role? What am I supposed to do? I want to contribute. Nobody cares what I say.
Put it this way. Let's say
because we can't, right? I mean, I'm contributing here to you, and there's a lot of competent there's a lot of competence in women, that sometimes men on the right find easy to just dismiss, but it's not really true.
Well, domestic competence doesn't mean stationary household. In a traditional sense, it was the opposite. So imagine, I think it's going to take probably 20 years for this to happen, where people who are Caucasian who are unemployed are outlawed in the state of California. They're no longer allowed to live in the state of California because Caucasians are all going to have to work. It's going to be mandatory employment, fixing crumbling infrastructure. You're not going to be allowed to raise your children at home if you're a pale-faced woman. So imagine that law was put into effect right now and you didn't want to go into the workforce fixing widgets and having the state raise your children. So your family decides to pick up states and move to Utah. Well, your job, as important as it is now, is going to be even more important on the road. Okay. So, imagine a household that's migrating.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. That's why
Yeah.
American Indian women used to laugh at European American women. It's just like, you women, you're not even women. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't even know how to pack. You don't even know how to pack a tent. What's the matter with you?
You just think about when you go camping with your family and you have to think, what are we going to eat each of these 7 days? How am I going to preserve it? Where is it going to fit in the car or whatever? And just erase the grocery store, erase the car, the gas station. It's not a simple task. It requires a lot of knowledge and forethought and planning abilities.
So that's the project. I should get you the first volume, Sons of Arius, in 2 weeks.
Awesome.
I plan on finishing the volume every month for the next 4 months. 90% of the material is written. I just have to shape it.
Yeah, I'm happy that you went with 4 volumes because that's much more manageable.
Yeah, it was just looking like a 900-page nightmare.
Yeah, because that's what Cracker Boy together with The Greatest Lie Ever Sold are pushing 1,000 pages, and it's huge. So we're doing another.
Don't worry, you're going to get some more Plantation America phone books in your email box. Okay, but yeah, that's other than that, I'm done with the fat books. I'd like to try to keep things
Yeah.
120 and 320 pages.
Yeah, just to keep it's just easier to keep it moving. And I mean, the work is all still there, but a smaller volume, I think, is more accessible. Do you need a nap?
Actually, I do take naps occasionally now. The decrepitude is setting in. I actually got punched in the eye last night.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I'm just so a little bit drowsy from that.
Okay, I have a question from a friend on YouTube, Seth Rutledge. He has 2 questions. James, with your eye messed up, is your writing suffering? Do you need help with reading? And James, are any of your books available on audio? Do you have plans for that? Desire volunteer opportunities? Question.
Okay. I would be greatly thrilled to have all my books on audio because when my brain gets too fried or my eyes get too worn out to write anymore, I'd like to be able to sit back and read it, but I'm not going to be able to read it. Apparently, I'm damaging my eyes with all the reading. A Hood Rat Halloween already exists in audio form, read by Oliver Wendell Hayes, a boxer, a fine young man of Bantu extraction, okay, that I have coached.
Oh, hey, what does he think of Kamala? Have you talked to him about that? He's Jamaican, right?
Yeah, I haven't talked to him about her yet. He is planning on taking a sailboat to Jamaica later this year, but I should be cornering for him in a cage fight sometime in October, and then I'll get a chance to talk to him. He's planning on putting up a Hood Rat Halloween on a monetized YouTube channel, and he's also I don't know if it's going to be the same YouTube channel where he pays strippers to read the news in bikinis.
What?
Yeah. He started this. He actually showed me one of the young ladies trying to read the news.
Oh, by the way, Ilan Omar cannot read. She's often on TV trying to read prepared remarks, and it's like you're back in the second grade, and
I think Oliver would give her a try on his YouTube channel.
I don't think
You know, like wear the hijab and little else.
so.
So yeah, I'd love volunteers for audio, for recording any audio for me. That
We
would
have,
be fantastic.
yeah, you and I have talked about it and haven't really managed to do it yet, but we have talked about making selections from your various books and having you read them and putting them up on our channel as well. We don't have.
We have 4 of them that you've already edited for me to do. We just haven't recorded it yet.
Yeah, we haven't because actually the last few weeks we've been recording a lot, and for months before that we had been barely doing one a month. So we're kind of back in the swing of it now. But also sound quality is an issue for me that I've become more picky on, and it wouldn't take much to just have like a little closet where we could go and have you read, but I have to do all my tech support at distance, so it's a little trickier, but it's something we could do.
Yeah, so I appreciate Seth. Is that a thing?
Yeah, Seth Rutledge is the username.
I appreciate his concern, and I'm doing what I can to minimize the eye strain. Whenever possible, I'm trying to. I write in 14 point. It's really a big font, and when I'm actually in the Baltimore area, I have a desktop that I can put together some of the bigger books on. That's actually, I will try to finish all my history books when I'm on the East Coast, so I can actually do the majority of the formatting work on this. It's like a 20-inch computer screen.
Nice.
8.5 by 11 with 14 points. So I'm doing what I can to milk what's left of the vision.
Yeah, but the eye has been manageable lately with the medication, but it's still going.
Yeah, I think my word count in July is looking much better than it was in June.
Yeah.
So June looks like it's probably going to be a low water mark. So, and I'll probably have to avoid trying to do like February, March levels because I think I kind of damaged mine.
Yeah, that was a little too much. But we could do more podcasting too, because that's pretty low strain for you, right?
Right. So from here on out, I'm probably just going to be sending you a book a month.
That's plenty. That's plenty. Oh dear. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. Let me go look at my list. Telling people that we have some guests lined up. We've already, by the time you hear this, we have already heard Big Ron and Mr. Gray, but we also have now on the schedule Dr. Dredd and Lloyd from South Africa. And I have also need to finalize plans with Sean and with another fellow from the West Coast who had gotten in touch with us as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So a lot of guest spots, but I like doing these too, so we'll keep these up as well. So
I'm excited.
Yeah. So that was episode 61. Thanks everybody for joining.
Getting late and we've got shit to do in outer space. Mother Mother Earth can wait. We will take the ones worth saving. Pack your bags, we are vacating now. Forever, forever. There's a cosmic radio in my head, and it's reading news articles, and the correspondent sadly said the universe is flat. He also mentioned that gravity is caused by our cavities and our reflection of time's not a receding hairline, it's all mass produced in the back of our mind. Let's face it, there's some things that we will never know, and I don't ever want to know. And so it goes. Let's fuck it up, let us run amok. Let's do the things that we want to do. We're animals after all. Out yonder, through the traffic and the people, boy, it really makes me wonder how we enjoy fucking people over. You used to be